Welcome all. Now, I wonder, did you watch the Oscars last night? You know that movie that won everything? Everything, everywhere, all at once. Well, this is that in built form, and what we're going to see, the multi-universe and so on. This is an extraordinary building that we're going to be talking about today, and an extraordinary architect. Welcome. I am the Dean of the College of Architecture, Planning, and Landscape Architecture at the University of Arizona. Applause. It is my great pleasure to be introducing Ryan Meeks today. He's a native son of Tucson and an alumnus of CAPLA, and we are very proud to be presenting him today at the South by Southwest as an award-winning architect and urban designer, and he's going to be presenting an intriguing project for you today. Ryan comes with an entourage, who I'm going to be introducing here. His family's here. His wife, Naomi. His daughter, Ava, a budding architect here. Susan Meeks, his mother, and Larry Meeks. And Larry is also an alumnus of CAPLA and an architect in this region, doing many projects in Austin. So thank you very much for being here as supporters to Ryan today. Ryan is a founder of the firm Bosque, and I think that's just such a great name. I'm a landscape architect, so Bosque meaning trees, collective, natural, and so on. And if I was starting a firm, I'd be stealing that name. That's a just terrific name. He's also an author, along with Laird, Turner Construction, the city of Denver, and also his clients, Meow Wolf, of an extraordinary building, Meow Wolf, Denver. So this is a perfect project to be bringing to you in South by Southwest, because this is about the convergence of art, design, technology, and construction. They come all together. And also what you'll see in this presentation today is what I really want us as educators to be blurring the lines between the different disciplines, between different roles and perspectives and processes in the built environment. So with that, I want to introduce Ryan Meeks, architect.
Thanks, Nancy. Appreciate it. Thank you. All right, everyone. There's so much to do at South by Southwest. Thanks for taking time out of your evening to join us here tonight to talk about this weird little project in Denver, Colorado. So tonight, we're going to talk about art. We're going to talk about architecture. We're going to talk about the creative process. And we're going to talk about why some of the lessons of this building actually have a lot more to do with our urban environment than you might guess. Now, this project is called Convergence Station, and it is an immersive art experience. And in fact, Meow Wolf's first ground-up, purpose-built immersive experience. And has anyone been to Meow Wolf? People have probably heard of it a little bit. So as you might know, there is no way that I can convey this project in 2D images, even on this amazing screen right here. You have to go see it. That's the point of the project. That's kind of the values of Meow Wolf, to get people out of their houses, away from their screens, and really experience something together. So what I'm going to do tonight, instead of doing a boring slideshow, I would really like to immerse you all in the experience of designing this building. Really tell you what it was like from the designer's perspective, and my very fortunate position being the leader of our design team to go through such an amazing project. And as we do this, I really hope that these ideas can be a little bit universal. You can think about how you might question your own interests and your own expertise and think about applying it in a new way. So let's get started with this design process. Put yourself back in 2017. That was about 50 years ago, I think, as far as I know. And I was very lucky to be working at a great design firm in Denver, Colorado called SAR, and leading the effort on this amazing master plan called the River Mile. Now, at this time, we were aware that Meow Wolf, this kind of crazy little arts company in Santa Fe, was looking to expand. Everyone kind of thought they were coming to Austin, but a few of us knew that they were actually coming to Denver. And this was a really exciting thing, though we didn't know too much about them. And it was at this time when my great client, Revesco Properties, called and said, can we fit them into the River Mile? Is there a place that we can fit them kind of down here at the end of the site? We think that might work out well from a phasing standpoint. And of course, the answer is yes. We can absolutely do this. But it's a little bit of an interesting question. The River Mile is something we can't cover tonight, but it's an amazing vision that this client had for a livable, mixed-use, high-density urban neighborhood. And the core of this project was the redevelopment of the South Platte River, which is not Lady Bird Lake here in Texas, but is a really important and historic aspect of Denver. And as we thought about how we could fit Meow Wolf into this story, kind of right over here, right down at the end of the project here, I think our client thought that we could just put them on the river and that would work out pretty well. But the little bit that I knew about them as an immersive experience, as an immersive building, it's going to be kind of closed in, and we want the river to be really active. And we also kind of get this feeling that Meow Wolf's been kind of looking at typical sites around town. Let's just give them something different, right? Let's take a risk and put them in the middle of all these elevated roadways, right? Let's just see what happens. And so to our client's credit and to Meow Wolf's credit, they absolutely love this idea, and now we're off and running on a project. So one of the first things that made me and our team feel really good as architects, as we have a lot of questions, was their team. It was actually being led by architects too. So we're in good company here. We feel like we've got some good standing, and we have some initial conversations with their team, but it's time to go down and see the exhibit. Their first exhibit in Santa Fe, the House of Eternal Return. So we pile in a van, we head down there to have this first experience. We check out their offices and we see their fab shop, and we're starting to kind of get a sense of the scale of this endeavor. But we really need to see the House of Eternal Return ourselves. We need to go check this out. And this is the point at which we really diverge from known territory and architecture, and certainly my experience. You know, we're going into the realm of dragons here. Because this exhibit is like nothing else that I've ever seen. There's a lot of immersive experiences that are happening now. We're at Wonder House. This is an immersive experience. But what Meow Wolf had created here after about 5, maybe even 10 years of developing these type of themes is just really something different. And we're enjoying this as architects, but we're also thinking about architect stuff. We're thinking about sprinklers, we're thinking about exit signs, we're thinking about stairs, we're thinking about all of the challenges that are going to go into creating this building. Who designed this stuff? Did Meow Wolf design this? Did their architect design this? How did the city review it? What's the load capacity of this floor? Does anyone use the toilet on the side here? What's happening? The floor's crooked. And we're also feeling like a little jealous about how creative Meow Wolf is being with kind of this environment that they've created here. None of us have done something this cool. And so we're all in. We're kind of in this exciting initial stage of the project, and there's a lot to figure out, but let's keep this going. What's really interesting at this point, we kind of take a break out of the exhibit and start talking about the project that we're doing in Denver. And there's a few things that we're noticing. One, the building doesn't matter. It's a converted bowling alley, and there's some history to it in Santa Fe, but this isn't why people are coming. People are not coming to see the building. And on top of that, their artists are really playing with architecture in this interesting way, walking through fridges, sliding through dryers, and hearing their creative team talk about this. The reason some of these exhibits exist is almost as a critique of the built environment. Everybody's growing up and living in these boring places, the same houses, the same malls, and we're looking to offer something different. And they've really done that. On top of that, there's a house inside the house, right? There's a house inside the building. And so this is the point where, although we're super excited about the vision, we're maybe even wondering, do we have a role on this project? Are we going to design anything? Is this great thing that we thought we were going to do going to turn out to be just being told what to do? Do we even have the experience to do a building like this? Does Meow Wolf or anybody have the experience to do something for the first time? The positives at this point are that the vision and the goals of Meow Wolf are super compelling. The team is very cohesive. There's a lot of trust. There's some amazing communication that's going on. And so we start to say, let's be good with this, right? We're gonna go from kind of the experience, what we've done in the past, to experience this as a verb. Let's really put ourselves into this project. And to explain why this is such a challenge, why not having your experience to guide you is such a big deal for architecture, I need to explain the process just a little bit. So bear with me as we get away from the exciting Meow Wolf slides. And I hope that this is kind of familiar to anybody who's been through project management or a creative process. We start with a concept, we develop it, we have to document it, and in our case, we really want to build something. And time goes by. The kicker is we start off with all these crazy ideas. We want to do everything in the world, but we have to move forward. We have to develop the project. And so that design potential starts to collapse, and it collapses really fast, much faster than we would like. And this causes a lot of issues. It's so well known. Like, we've got the McLamey curve, we got the different types of project management strategy to fix this process, kind of this challenge of architecture and the creative process. The other issue that's kind of represented by the blue here is that this represents where we're spending our time as architects. So most of the time is coming in the back end. We can't take the time up front. We can't be there for a year investigating super cool ideas. We have to make decisions and move forward. And even though we can kind of move this process forward, we can do really great coordination, we can have an integrated design process, there's only so much we can do. And at the end of the day, we're really spending 10% of our time on the fun design and 90% of the time working through the issues and really making the project work. And if you don't believe me, here's the concept design for this building. Just a few pages right there. That was pretty much all we had to do. And then here's the construction documents, right? And so, and if there's any architects here, they're thinking, well, that's actually a pretty thin set. And you're right. That doesn't include interiors. That's just the core of the building. So this is something that you might not be aware of what architects do. You think of us as kind of being these creatives and pie in the sky and giving TED Talks and like we got the problems of the world solved. But we deal with really complicated buildings and we have a lot of work to do and a lot of coordination. And the way that this process even works, the way that there's even a building that exists here, is that we use our experience. Architects that have been through it before, transferring their knowledge to the next generation, and really kind of predicting the issues that might come out of a certain design and what that's going to mean for the building as it moves forward. But we love to complain about this, right? You know, if only the client would just build our concept sketch, and then, you know, once they get a hold of it and the contractor does their thing, you know, it's not even our fault. You know, we like to just complain about this. We're always going from fantasy to reality. And the issue was this is not going to work at all for Meow Wolf. Not only has this not been done before, but there's not just one project to work on. They have hundreds of spaces. They have their own artists. They have artists in Colorado and around the United States, all kind of working on their own vision. And so there wasn't going to be any way to coordinate all this beforehand. This isn't a process. This is a roller coaster. And on top of this, based on the site and based on Denver being a pretty intense regulatory environment from a building department standpoint, the building is going to have a lot of features of a much taller building. So we're going to have really intense life safety standards, really intense fire protection, and the exhibit itself, to make this an immersive exhibit and have people be able to freely move around, is in an open 3-story atrium, which is a word that will give any architect nightmares. But it basically means everything's connected to each other, and it places a higher level of requirements on the materials and everything that's going to happen within the building. So this is just a really tough situation to be in here at this point. But this is where a team that's all in on delivering a vision is ready to embrace something counterintuitive. Let's look at our goals, right? Let's not think about what we've done before as architects. Let's really think about what it's going to take to accomplish this building and make it reality. Can we flip the process? Can we work from reality to fantasy? That's what we're being asked to do. Can we say yes as long as possible? Regardless of what we want to do as architects, our goal is to help the artists deliver their vision. And so what we came up with was, let's just chill for a little bit before we get too far. Let's really think about the project requirements that are going to be needed for this building. What can we get done first? What are the rules? What are the right constraints? What are the right system of success that is going to be needed for this building? And just move that blue blob before we even get started. And the goal is to leave the design potential as high for as long as possible, and try to keep down the cost of changes so that they can take as much time as they wish to do their process. And what was really interesting about this was, as the team started to develop this way of thinking, it brought in people that are normally kind of sidelined in the process or just sort of told to do their job. So the fire protection engineer, the mechanical engineer, the subcontractors who are going to be working on the life safety systems, we're all engaged in this process to figure out how we're actually going to make this building possible so that when the artists have spent all their time to create these beautiful exhibits, that we don't have to rip out some piece of structure or architecture. What a terrible outcome that would be. And what was really great is, like, when you decide the vision is non-negotiable, when that is the goal, and it doesn't matter what we think as architects, what we've done before, if we really work through that, and when your artists show the contractor something that looks like this, and I can confidently say to Aaron, like, it's going to be okay, like, this is how we're going to do it, that is a success. And it actually allowed us more creative freedom, not just as architects, but as the artists themselves. We really were able to work from reality to fantasy. And if you look at the result, I hope you agree that the process worked. Something that I'm really proud about is the building itself is pretty simple. I like to think it's a little mysterious. It kind of draws people in. And what Meow Wolf was able to achieve is their incredible kind of semi-architectural vision, right? All these elaborate city streets and kind of dioramas and all these different places that are absolutely compelling, amazing stairs, all of these type of things. and more than we could possibly fit, even in this enormous screen. But the result was just really incredible. Not just the art, but the technology, the audio, and all the different systems that went into this. Now, as the project is wrapping up, the architect's role is kind of winding down. The artists still have a ton of work to do, but our team's kind of moving on, and we're kind of reflecting on the process here. These are intense projects, and we love our teams. We love kind of the camaraderie of being architects and kind of being in it together. But I also saw something a little bit different on this project with the people that were involved. When you're asked to contribute in a way that's more than just do what you did before, like actually engage your thought process and be a part of what's happening here, and the architect is collaborative within that, the results were really amazing, and the teamwork and the camaraderie here was really amazing. And of course, the other thing we didn't anticipate was COVID happening in the middle of this project and their team going through a lot of changes. I think their organization went from like 100 to like 600 people by the time we were done with this. So being able to bring people into the process and have some stability with the way we were approaching the work was extremely important. So what, right? Great project, kind of a one-off. I'm not going to make a career out of doing interdimensional transit stations. There's not a great market for that. But it was a nice time to kind of pause and think about what just happened? What did we just go through? I've been practicing for almost 20 years and just kind of threw everything out the window for this one project to achieve this particular goal. And so this is the part where we really start thinking about the transformation. If you've gone through something like this, if you've been practicing in a certain way for so long and something works and starts to change your trajectory. And I don't want to kind of overstate that this is just about Meow Wolf. We had a cool kind of fun time, and now we're just going to go do something else. It's not really about that. So let's kind of focus. I'm going to kind of focus myself and really say, like, what do I care about? What has my work trajectory kind of been? And it is, for me, it was pretty clear. It's creating a beautiful, high-quality built environment everywhere. Really caring about cities, really caring about communities, really caring about where people live. And that's a simple statement, but it's a lot more complicated than that, right? And this is sort of the place where we get into, kind of the danger territory again. So, let's just kind of follow along and see where these thoughts go. Let's look at Austin. We're here in South by Southwest. Few cities in the United States have had more growth, more capital investment in the last 10 years than Austin, and downtown certainly shows there's some amazing things here. And buildings impact all of the things that we really care about, that communities really care about: quality of life, transportation, affordability, health, environment, climate. And while there's some amazing buildings to see here, we spent some time in the library the other day, absolutely incredible use of water and a beautiful place. Most of our built environment is dictated by the market. These are commercial buildings, these are residential buildings, and this is really where I've spent most of my kind of last 15 years of my career, and so this is what I'm really thinking about. These are really complicated issues that are not necessarily being tackled by these beautiful buildings that you're seeing in front of you. Isn't somebody able to think about this? Well, yeah, in between politics and science and engineering and community, there is this profession that has been training and knows about all these issues and has a balanced way of thinking to help our society through these. And that's architecture, that's designers. We're there, we care about this. When I go to crits with students in school right now, this is what they're talking about. This is what they care about. And I know this is what our communities care about too. But not everywhere is downtown Austin. This is just up the road, but this could be in Denver, this could be anywhere. The results are not always something that we're feeling very good about. There's a lot to be said about these types of environments. And architects, developers, the communities, we're doing the best that we can. We're trying to make these great places. And what's frustrating to me is that where are we spending our time, right? We're spending all of our time kind of doing the same thing again and again, using the same design process. And let's layer it on a little bit thicker, right? If we want to be aspirational, if we want to do a net zero building, if we want to think about the embodied carbon in our building, and these aren't hypotheticals, these are being regulated by cities now, these are really important to communities. These are constraints on the project that occur before the project even starts. If you want to do a mass timber building, you need to think about where the wood's coming from. You need to talk to the suppliers, and that's going to affect things like, where this column hits next to your vanity that you might not like. So the constraints are coming at architects already. It's happening. And what's been really interesting in kind of the last 5-10 years is that I think because architecture has not responded to this in a massive way at scale with big solutions, the market and the economy is kind of solving it for us, right? There's different initiatives that are looking to solve housing, right, in many different ways, whether it's primarily about wood or energy or mass production or off-site construction. And these are kind of becoming their little own specialty efforts within the field. And these are brilliant most of the time. You can't really fix construction at scale. But this is kind of the context that we're dealing with. Taking the control out of architects' hands. Because what have we been doing for the last 10 years to kind of preserve our design autonomy and solve these really challenging problems on projects? We're just making the process really complicated, right? Like we're using AI to do site test fits. We're using modeling to try to figure out environmental factors and really cool skins or the program of the building or smart aspects of the building models that we're doing. It's really overwhelming. And while there's some amazing things that are happening, and I would say some of the best design firms in the world have the resources to really tackle this issue and make it something special, these aren't the firms that are building most of the housing and the places in your communities, right? The typical project is kind of struggling through all these issues. And so what I think right now is for every kind of one amazing project that's happening, we're getting 100 or 1,000 kind of average outcomes, like just kind of the best that we can do with the tools that we have. And if you think about it at a city scale, all these different efforts, right, kind of working towards the same thing. Like, to me, this looks familiar, right? We have a goal. We want great places. We want a planet that's habitable. Are we going to be able to solve this at the individual level? Will one of these companies kind of take over architecture and send us aside? Will they be able to solve these? I'm not sure. And this is kind of where I see the parallels, or at least the relationship to what happened on Meow Wolf, right? The context has changed. This is the experience right now. The goals have changed, right? What communities are asking us to do, what we're aware that we need to be doing for the world. And what's our response right now? Have we thought about our role? And so as I started to kind of reflect on this and think about sketches over the last 5-10 years and really solving the same darn issues on every single project, this is the point where it's time for a transformation. It's time to take my career in a different direction. And so this is when I founded Bosk last year. And the idea is really this, how can we have an evolving design system, linking ideas, materials, technology? How can we have some of this ethos that was so successful for Meow Wolf that commercial buildings, that residential buildings are really struggling with? How can we bring these two things together? How can we create a little bit of simplicity and order here? So if we think about the experience, the challenge, and the response, and all the things that we have to put into it, if we have a goal, we have all these things we're dealing with, we have an outcome that the world wants, it seems pretty clear to me that we need to accept it and we need to work with it, right? The infinite design potential might exist for a library or an airport or a museum or a specialty project. There will always be those. There will always be the amazing architects doing that work. But for us that just want a place to live and we want it affordable and we all want to be able to live in a net zero building, it's going to have to change. And this is what I'm interested in. And we might say, maybe this seems too limited. Well, just as a quick example, architects worked with limitations for thousands of years, whether it was vernacular architecture or what we would call a style. This was architecture that was about the materials and the economy and the skills that were available at the time. And after modernism, when we had steel and concrete and glass and we could really do new, amazing buildings, we've been able to do anything we want for the last 100 years, right? And the outcomes, I think, are mixed. And I think it's good to remember that the goals have always been there. The basics have always been there. Housing, the structure, creating a solid building that we can understand and build and work with. So just as an example to wrap this up, let's go back to River Mile. Because this is a plan that has a huge aspiration. It'll be a new community, 62 acres, 15 million square feet, maybe 15,000 people living here. And this is just a drop in the bucket of the 60,000 units that we need in Denver right now from a housing standpoint. And this is going to take 30 years. If we want to achieve this goal and we want to spend our time designing buildings, thinking about the site, thinking about the environmental impact, and spend less time designing and fighting the same battles on every single building, imagine 30 buildings and a couple dozen architects all kind of going through the same issues, repeating our work. We really need to respect this change that's happening. We need to respect the energy efficiency, respect the idea about doing mass timber, respect our engineers, respect our craftspeople that are building this, and really think about this and find a way to design these buildings that gives us some stability and gives us some a position to stand on as architects to say that we can solve the world's problems, right? And I think that will give us the design potential to actually achieve these places, beautiful, high-quality environments everywhere. And so I hope I've inspired you a little bit to say, whatever you're working on, whatever your interests are, when you see a building or you think about the future and our objectives as society, what is the experience? What is the response? What's the challenge? And what's the transformation that you might go through yourselves to help make your goals possible? And for the architects, if there's at least one thing I can leave with you, let's do a whole lot less of this and a whole lot more of this. Thanks very much. Does anyone have any questions? I can't see so well if it's been help. Yeah, go ahead.
What code was it? An assembly space? What code requirement? What code requirements was the project after all? Was it an assembly space?
Yes, it was an assembly. It was a 5-story building, but it was reviewed as a high-rise because there's no windows, there's no fire access, so it was basically. From the fire department's perspective, that was the requirement. And an atrium on top of all that, so it was everything in one bucket. I touched on it a little bit, but we got more attention on this project for some obvious reasons than even the most complicated actual high-rise building that I've done in Denver. And I think the reason was, the plan reviewers could engage. We had their tech team do presentations on their electrical equipment and their low voltage to the inspectors so that this is one of our biggest concerns, right? They're going to come out and they're going to be like, I want to see what's underneath the mask, literally, which would have kind of been a failure on the architect's part. So, yeah.
Thanks, Ryan.
Hi, Michael.
What would you teach a student of architecture today, given your shift in perspective?
Yeah, that's great. What I always tell students when I haven't taught, but I've done a lot of reviews, architecture is an interesting degree, right? It's not a science, it's not an art, you're not learning how to be a doctor. You get out of it what you put into it, right? And so you can kind of cruise through school, sort of doing it halfway, but it's the most incredible, rigorous problem-solving degree that I think exists from a pure design perspective. And so I try to look at what students are doing and say, hey, you're really great at drawing, but you're not really kind of pushing yourself in this manner, right? Like, investigate that. School is the time to do that. Like, you're working on the ideas. You have to work on the ideas in school and kind of your own ethos. You have plenty of time to learn how to put a building together, and that's going to evolve. But I really think that critical thinking, communication, really listening to your client, or your professor, whoever's kind of giving you the project brief, and putting all that together in kind of a compassionate, understanding way is, whether it's these projects or whatever is going to be happening in 50 years, I think that still applies. Oh, yeah. One more over there, thanks.
Yikes. When you have really big projects, you have to think about the outside space as well as the inside space. And how do you go about incorporating elements of nature, especially when the environment that you're working in doesn't necessarily start with the natural elements that you'd like to have present?
Correct, yeah. So that was part of kind of the long-term thinking of putting this building in between the viaducts where it's at. The river restoration project, which is it's a multi-hundreds of billions of dollar Army Corps of Engineer project through the entire city of Denver. River Mile is going above and beyond that to get wildlife habitat and trails and more amenities along this 1 mile section of river. That project was out of sync with this. So if we had put Meow Wolf on the river, not only would we have had a blank building, it might have been inhibited where the trails could have gone. So sometimes it's just making the choice to say, this piece of land, which would have never been used for anything, it would have had a cell phone tower on it for the rest of eternity, can actually become something productive. So sometimes it's not always, particularly in an urban environment, we're not always able to incorporate nature, but we can make the best use of that site from kind of a respect standpoint for the future, something that won't be torn down in 10 years. There's some artwork that's on the site that Meow Wolf has done, some really cool sculptures, but it's a pretty flat urban environment down there. Also in a floodplain. Just one more constraint on the project. Thanks. Oh, yes, Ava.
Hello. Hi.
Go ahead. Oh, my daughter is asking what inspired me. The wonder of my daughter Ava, of course. No, that's a great question, and I think as architects, like I mentioned, working kind of in the commercial world and working on apartments and kind of working in, these kind of market rate buildings, it can be tough to be inspired sometimes. But what I tell people, and I tell myself, there's always something we can make out of this project. This was a fairly low budget building, right? This isn't an art museum in a particular standpoint. So we had to do something very simple. And the thing that I love the most about this project, and it happened very early, our lighting designer came up with the idea for kind of the ring of lights at the top of the building. We hadn't even thought of that. And when that happened, it was like, simplicity, we're gonna make this work, we're gonna fight to get that element in the project. So kind of finding the one thing that's really interesting and everybody gets excited about.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hi, I'm right here. Thanks so much for sharing. My question has to do a lot with the intersection between like temporary space making and scaling up into a location-based, like permanent experience. A lot of experiential designers, it's a growing community. And so what principles would you sort of recommend applying to these sort of temporary spaces that might aid in the scalability of a project for the possibility of a permanent location-based experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had a similar question from another artist recently, and something I'd say, and just kind of driving around Austin the last couple days, urban places need placemaking, right? I think there's tons of opportunities in parks and the public realm of our cities to provide more art, to provide more experiences for people. And so I think there's free land available everywhere. And so kind of exhibitions that can kind of be put up on that sort of that temporary basis and like work with municipalities, work with funds that are already available for the arts in most cities is a good place to start. From kind of the actual building standpoint, I think the longer you can go without have it being an actual building is good, right? This is where you kind of get into all the limitations that we had to and the expense and that sort of thing. Meow Wolf does offer a pretty good example. They had a few kind of underground exhibits in Santa Fe for a while, and their first real exhibition was a project called The Do Return at the art museum there in town. The name escapes me. But basically in a gallery this size, they constructed a kind of a ghost ship that had emerged from an event, and that kind of really launched their kind of their career as that organization. So I think finding those partnerships, thinking about it small, thinking about really refining what your idea is. You know, there's obviously a huge range of what immersive art means. This is the maximalist side. It doesn't just have to be that. But kind of finding good partnerships and sort of being prepared when you do kind of step up to this from kind of a funding and a partnership standpoint to know what you need to do.
Yes, thank you. I'm not an architect, but one thing I really liked what you said was this idea of instead of going from fantasy to reality, to switch it around and go from, to use this approach of going from reality to fantasy. And I really like that. I think it's, it's this idea of like making the thinking outside of the box the objective, as opposed to kind of, we start with that and okay, now let's go back down to earth, right?
Yeah.
And I think that in terms of problem solving, and also what you said about, from what you were presenting, it doesn't mean that because you do that, that you have to give up on rigor and being, organized and all of that. But I really like that idea of taking that approach instead and get there instead of from the other way around. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I kind of think of it, even back to being at Kapla and having fun in studio. If you gave an architect like a truckload of bricks and just said that's what you get to build it out of, you're going to get a way better result than if you're like, you can do anything in the world you want. Like sometimes those limitations are good, and kind of working with the actual reality of the system, I think is really great. Yeah, thanks. All right. Well, thank you all so much for taking the time with us here tonight.